All right, thank you so much for staying with us. Good morning and welcome back to the program. Being a Tuesday, it's 12th day of May 2026. Karibu sana. The time now is 6 minutes past 7 a.m. Let's get into the discussion of this day 2 of the Africa Forward Summit happening here in the capital. A lot happened yesterday with different heads of state attending different forums across the city, and that is going to culminate today with the different agreements that are going to be signed, and of course the deals that will be signed and partnerships, more of them coming later in the day. But I want us to dig deeper and understand what it really means after this forum, the proposals and of course the declarations that will come out. 30 heads of state and over 3,000, close to 4,000 delegates attending this summit. Let's dig deeper into it. Africa Forward Summit Day 2, more deals and partnerships. I'm joined by FCPA Hesbon Omolo, who is a council member, East Park. Karibu sana Hesbon. And of course, joining us for the first time is Alexander von Rogen. He is a global policy analyst. Alexander, karibu sana. Good morning.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Asante sana. Okay, great. Let me start with the front page of the local dailies before we get into the discussion. On the front page of the Daily Nation, CCTV phone data to nail priests killers. That is on the front page of the Daily Nation. The priest who was killed last week in Nakuru County was laid to rest yesterday. And on the night of May 3rd, a gang broke into a church compound and murdered Reverend Julius Ndumia of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, Tabuga Parish in Nakuru. 5 days later, a signal from his stolen phone led detectives to 2 suspects. During the cleric's burial yesterday, speakers demanded that police make public CCTV footage that reportedly captures the gang, and which detectives told a court is still being reviewed. Gachagua, Kindiki clash on Ruto's call to doctor. That is that's on the in the courtrooms where now the showdown has erupted between Deputy President Kithure Kindiki and his predecessor Rigathi Gachagua over claims that President Ruto called a cardiologist to inquire about Gachagua's health condition during the 2024 impeachment proceedings. Based on what you're about to discuss, Macron's plea as France seeks new ties in Africa. French President Emmanuel Macron has acknowledged France influence in parts of West Africa, saying that the setbacks have pushed Paris to strengthen ties with Anglophone nations such as Kenya. What do you make of that, Hesbon? That's from the president himself.
I think it's just an acknowledgement that their relationship with most of the West African countries,
yes,
their former colonies, has not been rosy. You know the challenge they've had in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. So clearly something is not right about how they've related over the years.
Yes.
And I think some of the things that we have complained about and the West African nations have complained about are even related to the structure of how the economies of those countries have been over the years managed. But of course, there's also the interventions in the security space, helping either foment trouble for some of the leaders or defining the leadership in some of those countries. So those kind of interventions have created a period or a history where most of those countries have also not developed. Remember, the entire 14 nations in West Africa, the former colonies, all use 2 currencies. The CFA that works in the Central African region and the other CFA that works in the west side of it.
Yeah.
And you are talking of 2 central banks serving 14 countries. And then you have to keep 50% of your reserves in the French bank. They have a veto around your monetary policy. Then they have all these issues around having a table or a seat in the joint central banks of those nations. That has been the history over the years. And that meant that if the issues are related to inflation, maybe there are things they cushion.
Yeah.
But if there are also issues about what is unique to a country, then you are pegging almost 14 nations, lumping them together. So I think that has been part of the history, which France, to be fair to them, they've been trying to shed in one way or the other. But again, looking at where they are today, definitely they feel they need to look elsewhere in terms of expanding their influence in the Anglophone region. And therefore, coming to Kenya as an anchor state and probably targeting this part of the world may be a good strategic move.
Yeah.
And if you look at, for them, of course, if you look at the joint value of the economies of the entire Francophone nations that were under their tutelage for long, it's more or less summed up by 5 countries in East Africa. That is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Somali. That is how significant this region is. Kenya alone is half the economies of those West African countries that have been under France. But let's look at it differently.
Yeah.
The Kenya-France relationship has been one where the balance of trade is skewed in favor of France, almost 2-to-1. So there's definitely a reason for them to scale up here. They've consistently supported French companies to expand in this country. Today we speak of over 150 companies that are doing very well in this region, the Carrefours of this world. So clearly, they've seen the benefit of working in this space.
Yeah.
And of course, the conversation is framed around partnership, around the entire African continent. But the elephant in the room is, of course, when you look at Kenya and France, the economy is 24 times bigger than ours.
Hold on that. You'll pick it from the elephant in the room. Alexander, when you look at this, Kenya plays a very crucial role in East Africa. Basically, when you see France and Kenya holding this summit for the first time here, then it sends a very big signal. But let's come back to what happened yesterday. It seems that Emmanuel Macron feels much at home when he's here.
He was very enthusiastic. There was a lot of pomp and excitement. There was an outburst by him condemning part of the crowd for making too much noise during a performance. Of course, you're going to see narratives in both directions. Someone is going to say he's being arrogant as a colonialist, telling people what to do. On the other hand, the other narrative is going to say he's supporting the little guy that's up on the stage trying to get a message across, and people around him were being simply rude. That's a common sense explanation.
Yeah.
I was there. I thought he was showing leadership. But keep in mind, this is all for posturing. This summit was hastily put together. It benefits both France and Kenya in terms of the announcements. Now, the execution of those announcements is yet to be seen. And how that's going to evolve is a lot more complex than just signing a piece of paper.
And actually, that has always been a problem because we've had these summits over and over again. But the follow-up and implementation and executions of these ratifications and agreements has always been a very big problem.
Well, they sell you the sizzle, but not the steak. And they have to realize to implement a lot of these changes, financial changes. President Ruto is a very clever fellow. He's Africa's salesman. He's organized this summit with France. He's going to be the mandated representative for the AU in the upcoming G7 conference in France. That puts him on a pedestal. He has the authority to negotiate the amendments to the financial structure of Africa. Now, that's why the focus of this summit is also on AI and digitization. Now, we're putting the cart before the horse, because how do you implement something? Do you put the roof on your house before you finish the foundation? Or do you finish the foundation? Now, if that foundation doesn't have the structural integrity, as soon as you start building 2, 3, 4 stories on that building, you're going to get stress cracks. And then you're back to repairing the foundation.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make an analogy that's simple to understand. I see Dangote in his speech. I really respect him. He's one of Africa's rising stars that knows how to do business in Africa. And he made it very clear he will build a refinery in East Africa with certain conditions that he needs guarantees, because he's learned the hard way in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Okay. He also made a very interesting comment. He said Africa needs to build from the bottom up, not from the top down. And the top down was the former colonial formula. By the time money went to the top and trickled down through all the various levels of middlemen, the man on the street saw very little of it.
Yeah.
Similarly, that's how the UN gets run. Now, Donald Trump has been the catalyst to a lot of this change because he's defunded the UN, he's defunded USAID, he's defunded a lot of NGOs. That's put pressure on Africa to focus from aid to a trade mentality.
Yeah.
And that's another focus that was mentioned at the summit by Macron, which means policies, government policies, protectionism for investors is a key point. And we have to really look at that. One thing the West has that Africa is yet to implement is title insurance for properties. You know, in America, if I buy a house and there was a title problem from 3 previous owners, I have an insurance policy that pays me out. I don't lose any money. Africa doesn't have that, and I think that's part of that evolution towards financial responsibility.
You talked about something about from aid to trade. And I think this also calls about the industrial sovereignty that Africa must enjoy. And you know, when you wake up at this point, you look at the big brother, Hesbon, the big brother cutting some aid. Apparently, this is going to be one of the main focus because we have to support local industrial essentials for Africa so that we can have trade amongst ourselves. Are we waking up too late in the day?
I don't know whether to say we are waking up too late in the day, but I think either way, the fact that we're waking up is important. And the conversations going forward must move away from aid.
Yes.
Because once you are in a space where you are aided, you don't have a voice. So how can we create
become
a voice?
vulnerable.
We become vulnerable.
Yeah.
So can we get to a space where we work together, we talk to each other? And I think some of the barriers that make our nations vulnerable, like he said, is the financial architect. That, for example, a 10-year bond in Kenya would cost twice as much as it costs in the US or in the developed world. And yet we are probably more needy around that space. So we are paying much, much more. So these are things that, and if you dig deeper, there are issues about risk premium, several other things around that space that probably may not necessarily be country specific. It may be just a whole region lumped up together. So conversations around that, I hope when the president has an audience with the G7, he can be able to speak on behalf of African countries how to reform the financial architecture. So that is good. But beyond that, and that's why I like the conversations they held with the French president around support towards scaling up our industrial capability to produce goods locally here rather than ship out raw materials or basically unfinished products to be finished in the West. How can we have that technology transfer and capability to do that here? Of course, it's one thing to talk about what is possible, but the devil is in the details. How often do we have some of these contracts splashed over the headlines that Kenya has done this? 2-3 years later, there's nothing on the ground because there are a lot of challenges when it comes to real implementation. So part of my expectation today is that beyond what we've read, that we can put pen to paper some of these things, but also have clear timelines on how we follow them up.
Yeah.
I like what we did earlier in the year when we had the Kenya Investment Conference, where by the end of that conference, 20 deals were signed to be implemented immediately. And I think that makes more sense, rather than you've ring-fenced this at country level. But now, when you now go to the entity specific or the institutions that are involved, you will find several barriers, some not written in black and white, which actually discourages investment. So there are things that we also need to look inward as a country and also as a region. What are some of these hidden things around how we push forward these engagements that make them fail in the long run or slows them down. So I think that is where a lot of focus needs to be put. But I agree with his view that we need to really, really get beyond what is signed on paper.
Let's talk about, there's that aspect of trust deficit. Deals will be signed, agreements will be made, but do we have trust amongst ourselves as African countries? Because Kenya has got one of the most important part of ourselves, agriculture, we have got tourism that we take care of, and that trust amongst ourselves. Yes, France is trying to come in between to make us more united, but it's going to take a little bit of some time for us to come together as Africa and trade amongst ourselves. Alexander?
You're absolutely correct, but you have to add an extra dimension of geopolitics to it. I'll give you examples in Africa, which you have to look outside of Kenya. Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore. Now, I've been a staunch supporter of him for his mandate, from what I see so far. If he proves to have integrity, he's a true leader. But he made a comment not so long ago. He says, some of Africa is not ready for democracy. It needs an autocrat to get things done, because the political system suffers from paralysis through analysis. Things don't get done. Now, if you stick with common sense for items that are an immediate priority for your people, such as agricultural enhancement, limitations of imports, and taking the resources of the country and putting them under a federal control, such as, I'm going to say, gold. I think you're going to see this across Africa, even in Kenya, although it hasn't been implemented yet, is that they're going to nationalize gold. Why? It will stabilize the currency of the country. It'll have a gold reserve to back up the currency. Not sending it to Paris in a depository and then being told how you can spend it. But to implement that, to avoid the corruption, I think one of the foundational pivots that I spoke about earlier is to use technology, digitization, blockchain technology, to implement that blockchain into the natural resources. I'm heavily involved in artisanal mining. Okay, if you look at Tanzania, for example, 65% of the mining production in gold is artisanal. The government rarely sees any tax revenue on it. Smuggling, black market activities, you name it, that's the dominant factor. So to offset that, the government cuts deals with multinational mining companies to come in. They bump the indigenous people off their land, they move villages, they create political instability with that. And then they're dealing, again, with an outside company that is reaping profits that, no risk, no reward, but a lot of those should stay in the country, so they should be tied into things. So if you take the artisanal approach, which is small scale, one at a time, put in a blockchain, which identifies money that goes to the government, whether it be a royalty, whatever that percentage is in that country, because the demographics change throughout Africa. You register the miners, you legalize them, they pay taxes, and now you impose health care and safe working conditions and elimination of child labor and all the checklists Europe and everywhere else is mandating of inclusion. And now you have a foundation that can't be altered from the bottom up. But it also eliminates a lot of the corruption.
But it seems you're saying that Africa is using this platform to demand a stronger voice in shaping international norms.
Well, for Africa to be, say, make Kenya number one or make any country number one, you have to have those foundational points to show good governance. You will increase your tax revenues. You'll have a stronger currency. You'll be you'll have less dependence on aid. Again, we're going back to the aid versus trade. Aid is a form of enablement, and I hate to say it, it's a form of slavery because it causes dependence. If you want individuality and independence, you have to move to trade. So that transition is going to be short-term pain and long-term gain. And it's a political hotspot for politicians which are subject to getting voted into office when they create that pain in order to give the country the gain.
Okay.
And how they sell it.
Edmund, you talked about the financial architecture. Yeah. So then we have got Africa. Debt is here. We have got development financing and all that. Explain that to us so that we become a little bit free from that.
I think there's no better example to use that than our Kenyan situation. You look at how much we're paying. We recently renegotiated our Eurobond loan, which was falling due in 2024, and the one that was due in 2027. And at what cost? Almost over 9% interest annual. Now that is very high. If you look at the performance of those blue chip companies across the globe, they would give you a return on investment of about the same amount. So what is this business you are in as a country that you have to pay 9%? Ultimately, when you draw your budget, and I'm happy in another 1 month we'll be having our budget read, we are spending 1.4 trillion Kenya shillings on debt service alone, on interest. Now our budget on education is 700 billion. That is almost twice our budget on education, the entire education system. Now we've not even put in the other sectors' health. So it means that progressively we are spending much of our resources towards debt service. And it's because the cost of debt is very expensive.
Yeah.
And therefore, there is need for us as a continent to ask ourselves, why is it that in all emerging economies, the average cost of borrowing in the financial market is about 4% or thereabout, 5%. That is in Asia, countries of that nature. But you come to Africa, the average is double. So what does that tell you? It tells you that there's something that is very wrong, that you who is poor has to spend much, much more to access the same capital. It's more or less the way society sometimes is structured. Yeah. That somebody living in a slum in Nairobi pays twice as much for water than somebody living in an upmarket place in Nairobi. So what is it that you need to do, if you use that illustration, to break that barrier? So how easy can pipes get to that slum? How easily can we be able to deal with the insecurity around the spaces that make access to capital skewed unfairly towards the African continent? So I think these are conversations that we must have honestly, but also as African countries, we have financial vehicles that we are part of, like the African Development Bank. How strongly do we contribute towards their sustainability? How can we reform them as well so that we don't ask of others what we cannot do locally? So AU has its work cut out, but the leaders who are speaking on behalf of AU, and I like the voice and tone our president has set for the overall interests of the African continent, that we need to have that space strengthened. But also beyond that, if you can strengthen all that, but if your balance of trade is still as poor as it is, if you're still spending and sending your raw materials to the West, then you'll never recover, because what leaves your country comes back as import at a price 4, 5, 6 times. Which you ought to have done the value addition. Exactly. So there are challenges and barriers, including certain requirements around quality that may neither be here nor there. Okay. Sometimes they're just structural, meant to block access to markets. I think some of the conversations that we should have at the engagements today is about leveling that playing field so that you do not bring in unnecessary or unrealistic barriers. And I would tell you some of the barriers are very painful. You've met every requirement, but because of corruption, you are assessed even for access to markets such as in the AU market. Then something happens internally within your system, and you'll find a product that met all the requirements, even dairy product. You are told this one has this level of aflatoxin. So there are issues that we also need to kick out. Ultimately, if corruption is embedded in all these processes, there will be always a space where...
Let's take a break. When we come back, I want us to dig deeper into that when you talk about level playing field. Because when the trade barriers that we still suffer, and also, is Africa trying to use this platform as a springboard, to have that global influence? G7 summit is coming very soon, so do we have a common voice to present ourselves? Let's talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. All right, and welcome back. It's a breakfast show. It's a very cold morning in the city, so we have to warm ourselves as we have this discussion. Okay, so let's come back, Alexander. We are talking about the issue of Africa just positioning itself for the global influence. The G7 summit is coming soon.
Yes.
I have a feeling that with this kind of forum, we are going to have a very strong voice and some of the points to present when our time comes at the summit.
Yes, and I think the conditions that will be placed on Africa to achieve that level of equality on a level playing field, if you want to call it, are going to be implemented. And you see some of those implementations coming very quietly right now. Deputy Director Bailey of the FBI met with your head of DCI this past week. The FBI is opening an anti-corruption office in Nairobi. Let's read between the lines there.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
It's as brief as that.
As brief as that.
Okay. Esbon, the global influence, because when we have Africa, we have got, for example, President William Ruto. His voice is a very strong voice when it comes to these summits. We've heard even in the past when he said that we need to present ourselves, not for photo sessions, but we must present and represent ourselves as sovereign countries. And whatever ratifications and agreements that we come up with must be implemented. I mean, Kenya, we are already, leave alone Africa, but Kenya itself, how are we positioning ourselves globally?
I think Kenya, to a very large extent, we've had, of course, on the surface, you can call it non-aligned position. We are very comfortable dealing with China where we have to deal with them. We are also happy to work with Americans so that we don't offend them in one way or the other. But also, our relationship with most of the countries in the EU has been good. Our colonial masters, the UK. So, in a way, that has helped us to balance some of our business interests.
Yeah.
You know, the biggest project currently going on in Kenya is the Rironi Summit Road, which initially we were to do it through the French government. I think something didn't go right. We are now having it done by the Chinese. And I think for us, what would help us more is the change of direction. And I think Alexander did mention some of the reforms are very expensive, painful, and they can be politically dangerous. But I think one of the things this country has done is to re-engineer our saving culture. So from saving as little as 200 Kenya shillings, which is less than $1, less than $2, today we save 12% of every person's income in the country. And that has fueled our national savings. Our national social savings fund has grown over the last 2 years, almost double or what we've had since independence. And that has opened up funding and access to local capital that can be used to augment or align the PPP projects that allows us to have partnerships around several development initiatives. So it's a good thing around what we're doing. But we are also looking at being the anchor state, not just in this part of Africa, but to be the go-to country, given that we also host the UN bodies here. So we have that strategic alignment that works best for us, but it also exposes us in a way to some of the challenges that may be facing some of the Western countries. But I think as a country, the timing couldn't have been better for us to be able to leverage our national interest, to be able to support the growth of this African community, which we are the dominant player, but also work with the rest of the world. So I think Kenya is in a good position to strategically drive its national interest. Of course, it's Kenya first. That's why the leadership in Kenya today is called Kenya Kwanza. It's basically what Trump says. But to what extent are we able to enforce that? It's about the value addition and the use of technology to be the drivers of change in the country and in the African continent. So I think it's a good thing. We've already moved to be the 6th largest economy in Africa. There's an opportunity for us to also exploit. Just like France is moving away from its trading pattern in West Africa, as South Africa also struggles with its BRICS challenge with the US, we have an opportunity also to take advantage and be the go-to country. And I'm glad the G7 summit where President Ruto is invited is an opportunity to sell Kenya, to sell Africa in terms of the outcomes that I'm hoping to hear at the end of the summit today. What are the outcomes of this summit? And are they things the president can carry to the G7 summit in France? And two, are we able to carry the conversations about changing the financial architecture, the cost of debt in Africa? Are we able to carry along the entire African Union? And I think that is very, very important.
Yeah.
And I'm glad many African countries have come to our city today to be part of this conversation from all over the West, except maybe for South Africa, which for justifiable reasons you can understand why they may not be very strongly represented here.
Alexander, what about the diplomatic diversification that this summit intends to achieve?
Diplomatic diversification?
Yes.
Well, that's a broad stroke question. I think the purpose of this summit is for Kenya. I think it's existential for France, because if we go back to a former president, Jacques Chirac, he said years ago, he says, France is dependent on Africa for its balance sheet.
Yeah.
Okay, that was said many, many years ago when the CFA franc was still in full swing and before the coup belt emerged out of the Sahel. I think Ruto's been rising in his position as posturing himself as Africa's preeminent salesman, and has been mandated now by the AU because he didn't have that stature before. And you have to look at his efforts. He's had some missteps. Worst one I can think of is sending the Kenyan military to Haiti. In his attempt to show Kenya as a powerhouse in Africa towards world peace and supporting of peace missions, he sent his troops to a country that didn't speak the same language. That was a flaw. That's being reorganized now with Franco-African soldiers. But I like to paraphrase Einstein. I don't make mistakes. I continually find new ways of how not to do things. And I think that's President Ruto. So he will take that as a positive. He's learned from it. He's rising in posture in Africa. Kenya is rising with that. He's made some mistakes, but he's quick to correct them when necessary. The reversal of the new tax when they had the Gen Z protests here is a prime example. It means he's malleable and adaptable, which you have to be in geopolitics. But you also have to be dictatorial in certain mandates as well. So how do you maintain that balance? And that comes from talent.
Okay, that sounds interesting. That sounds interesting. But you talked about the youth. How is this summit about to fix the youth unemployment?
The summit is all about youth because it's the youth that is going to run Africa. Gen Zers, look at Madagascar, look at Tanzania, look at the Bobby Wine situation in Uganda, look at the protests here in Kenya, the takeover in Nepal, Bangladesh. When you have a population, because Africa has the highest growth rate on the planet, and the population, 70% of it is under the age of 25 or 30, you have to appeal to that large segment. And this is a generation that's never grown up without an internet.
Yeah.
They can amass themselves at the push of a button on a cell phone. They are a power to be reckoned with. And if you don't institute new policies and agendas that appease them for job creation, for advancement in their culture and in their country. Africa suffers from brain drain. Any talent in Africa usually ended up in the West or Europe. In order to effectuate Africa first, you have to have programs which are going to keep the brain power here. How to achieve that? I would say the best approach would be bilateral trade with the West, where it includes educational and development of factories and manufacturing within Africa, which has been frowned upon in the past because it involved technology transfer. And they were stingy with that. They wanted to keep Africa poor. Well, those times have changed now.
Yeah. Okay. When you look at the whole of this, do we have a situation where now this summit represents some sort of forward-looking foreign policy for Africa?
Yeah, I think, yes, it does, because I think as this forum will come to an end, there will be resolutions that they'll come up with. Some of those resolutions should find their way in the G7 summit.
Yes.
There's no better representative of Africa than President Ruto to be able to canvass them. Two, the issues that we've spoken about, global financial architecture, the reforms, there's no better voice to stand in the G7 and say, these are the things we are looking at as Africa.
This is our stand.
This is our stand.
Yeah.
It's about debt architecture in terms of our hauling, how debt to the third world is managed. Again, he is the voice. So there are several things, but I think the biggest one for me would be strategically positioning Kenya as a gateway to the region, especially the Indian Ocean corridor for the G7 nations and even countries in the West. There is no better opportunity for that to happen. And already you can see the signs. If the French can commit, of course the devil is in the details how it will be done, but if you can commit 104 billion Kenya shillings towards modernizing the port of Mombasa, towards improving the logistics around that space, it speaks to something bigger. And I'm sure it's not just about France alone. There could be other countries that may want to partner within the G7 or the EU to exploit the opportunities that exist in our region. So I think it's an opportunity for Africa to redefine its foreign policy, including around the security organs of the world. Of course, we know we are still a light continent, because if the entire Africa is at the same level of just one country, France, I mean, if you can only bite as much as you can chew. But more importantly for me is what Alexander has mentioned. How do we ensure that technology transfer and the ability for African economies to be able to reduce over-reliance on import of what they can be able to produce locally?
Yeah.
For me, that is the biggest problem. And even as we pride ourselves as a country to be doing so much, look at our number one export. It's tea. How do we export it? We export it largely in bulk, semi-processed, so that our tea that is of high quality is used to blend with other poor quality grades to come up with that pack that sells 4 or 5 times more. Why are we not doing complete value addition here? If we did that alone, we'd probably triple our export on tea in terms of value. So I think it's important that we take these conversations very seriously. You look at our academic institutions, universities in Kenya, how many of them are very strong around technology? Very few. They are basically struggling. And I think those are the spaces that we need to improve. So when I see the kind of investment we are putting in the University of Nairobi, and I'm glad the day one of this summit was anchored in actually the youth, because the venue, the choice of venue and the conversation there clearly speaks to the future. And the future is about innovation, AI. How do we reform our learning institutions to be geared towards strengthening our, I think there's a STEM education system, so that it's about where we need to go. And I think Africa and Kenya are challenged. We spoke about manufacturing, even in the digital space. But look at the kind of phones we're doing. We're basically doing phone assembly. Are we in a position where we can say in years to come, we can even make chips? So those are the conversations that we need to have. And if we can leverage on the strength of these developed nations to come and have these things done here. I think we'll be able to change the conversation and the narrative of Africa into the future. But
Yeah.
we have that promise.
All
And
right.
of course, maybe just to add one more thing, there's something Zimbabwe has done which is very good. They've struggled with inflation that has been massive. But the moment they went the gold way, I think they've, to some extent, reduced the pressure on the economy so that they back their currency with gold. I think even as a country, as we do all these things, as we open our minds to all the kinds of exploration going on, we need to be sure that can we be able to increase our gold reserves, because
Yeah.
it's something hard you can use as a basis to avoid the kind of pressures we had 2 years ago when our currency against the dollar just moved from 130 shillings to 160 within a very short time. And you can imagine what it came with in terms of the impact on the economy, quickly followed by our attempt towards raising money to fund our public debt. And of course, we almost lost the country to
Yeah.
protests.
But I want to ask this question to all of you. How is this summit quite important for France, particularly? Alexander?
Well, France is under pressure. Francophone Africa is the topic of, 9 coups in the last as many years. In fact, they even call the Sahel the coup belt. It has a reputation, and I respect Macron. He says we have to reassess our situation. We have to reassess our role in Africa. So rather than to apologize or restruct in countries where there's a lot of emotional resentment right now,
Yes.
it's better to reintroduce yourself to Anglophone Africa, Kenya, case in point. President Ruto seized that opportunity. So it's a marketing campaign round. Now, if France fails, Kenya still wins because they haven't given anything up. They've acted as a catalyst to a summit. A lot of commitments are being made. Of course, they have to be bilateral. Kenya's going to have to bring things to the table, as indicated by Macron as well. They don't stress that a lot. It's funny because these are the underlying conditions that are talked about. Now, part of this summit is public. A lot of this summit is under Charterhouse rules.
Yes.
Which means closed doors, nobody gets to talk about what was said or who said it. And especially the security meeting that's going to happen today. So, but the sizzle is there. We haven't seen the steak yet or tasted it.
Yeah.
I think it will. I think you're going to see a lot more of this kind of activity, and it's going to attract other nations that are very quiet and methodical. For example, Dangote is now being approached by Norway to make a $2 billion investment. Norway is a Nordic, very conservative. They're like the Germans. We like it black and white. We don't like a lot of gray in the middle.
Yeah.
We don't like corruption. But we're very pragmatic about doing honest business and keeping a schedule. But Dangote has proven he can navigate those waters.
Yeah.
Here's the other problem. As Dangote gets bigger and wealthier, he's going to attract resentment. The AU is going to say, we've got too many eggs in one basket. Now we've created a monopoly. So how do we regulate that? It's happened in America too in the past. But I wouldn't worry about that so much right now. I look at Dangote as a catalyst to pro-African development. All right. I also see especially Canada coming to bear here. I represent an area in Canada which is the innovation capital of the country. They want to reach out to Africa. They want to do bilateral trade with the tech companies that are in the Kitchener area of Ontario. The member of parliament for Kitchener, Kelly DeRitter, she's very unique. She's an engineer that went into politics, not a politician pretending to be an engineer. And she is the AI seat for the caucus in Ottawa. She brings a lot of value to the table on bilateral agreements, especially educating and prepping Kenyan youth, or African youth for that matter, with our universities in digital format, in AI advance. And Canada obviously is neutral. It's never been a colonializer, so they wear a different kind of hat here. Plus they're bilingual, French and English.
Yeah.
So I throw that out as an example. I think you're going to see a lot more movement in that direction. Now, when we get back to Africa building up this trade through integrity of a blockchain, cryptocurrency is based on blockchain. It can't be altered. So when you talk about corruption, if somebody throws an invoice from a bylaw enforcement officer that really didn't exist, that becomes part of the blockchain, and that corruption gets exposed.
Okay, because at the end of the day, it's more of an Anglophone outreach. Is France trying to make on that reset button?
I think France admits in its own words that it's lost influence in the Sahel. So definitely they would want to expand into the Anglophone Africa. But I think Kenya offers a perfect gateway. We are a fairly stable nation. We host United Nations various agencies in our country, so it works for them. But the other issue is how can they secure alternative, what they've lost in the Sahel.
Yes.
So if they can access our markets here, because they're looking for markets for their products, definitely. That is the truth.
Did I hear President say that you have money, but you have products or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at our pharmaceutical industry. How much do we import from France? Quite a lot. Quite a lot. Or the medicines we use. Because we don't have the capacity to manufacture them here. At least we are still trying, but we don't have the capacity. Then, of course, France is trying to clean its image. So try and have military presence, but not bases. I think the way they've operated previously in West Africa, having those military bases, I don't think has augured well. So they're very careful how they're coming into this space. And that's why the language is coached correctly. It's about partnership, it's about mutual benefit, it's about signing cooperation and technology transfer, so that what you get is that this is a partner that is coming on the surface. Like the sizzle looks good. The problem is what could be in the steak. So it's up to us to be sure that the steak remains what we've smelled in the sizzle, and not something else.
Yes. What about other markets? Because other jurisdictions have enjoyed Kenyan market for a very long time. Let's take, for example, China. What do you think China is going to do and the big brother? Because at the end of the day, France is not so far away from here. France enjoys a very warm corner with Africa, and now he's in Kenya. What do you think the big brothers are saying out there?
I think for China, their biggest concern will not even be that our market here is being invaded by other countries. In fact, their engagement with us has been one where I have no interest in what you do in your country. Let's do business. If my products can be more competitive than the rest, the market forces will determine. And if it's about seeking funding, projects we can work with you on, we will be able to work with you. So I don't think that relationship with China is going to be affected. But of course, China takes note that there is another player coming into this space. And so do other countries. I'm sure when we talked about Nairobi Railway City, it was all UK leading. But now the same space is expanding with what the French are bringing in terms of just modernizing our commuter railway across the various satellite towns and regions within Nairobi. That is actually good for us. So technically, because of the way we are structured as a country, and I think it's a good way, Kenya, interestingly, is among the most diversified economies in Africa. And that allows us to plug into almost every sector very, very strongly. If it's the IT, if it's in the services sector, if it's in the manufacturing in our small way, agricultural sector. So there is always almost something for everyone to bite. But don't forget that we are also surrounded by very troubled neighbors. Somalia is not very stable. We have South Sudan not doing very well. Ethiopia, there is a lot of strong Oromo. There are local tensions they have as much as they're stable in their space. And then up as you pass Uganda, you know, there are challenges that go towards DRC. There is no better gateway to that part of the world than Nairobi and Kenya.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's important that for countries such as France, for the EU, the G7, this is the right gateway to use. And because our financial architecture and our systems are fairly quite good, you can plug in and move.
Yeah.
And that's why many Europeans of late, we say many are very comfortable to come and retire and enjoy their quiet life here. They are almost certain that there's a Kenyan that will listen to you when you speak in English, and they will speak very good English back at you.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to how conducive this environment is. We may just need to struggle with the other languages.
Should have a bragging right.
Yes,
to some extent.
Of course, we have those bragging rights of around speaking good English compared to other nations. But of course, it's not just about English. It's about, can we be able to leverage on the various trading partners' language? If you want to do business in France, you need to understand the French language. If you want to do business in Chinese, Mandarin is key.
Exactly.
But I'm glad we are able to navigate that space well. So for me, it's an opportunity for us to take advantage of, but be careful that in those arrangements, our interests are properly secured. Because sometimes I can smile at you. They say, once bitten, twice shy.
Yes.
When we were first approached with religion, we embraced religion, but in the process, other things came later. So even now, yes, as we embrace the partnership, we must be able to be careful and note what are the dotted lines that we need to take note of, so that we are not overly exposed as a country and we do not injure our standing and reputation and ability to do business, even with our own brothers. Remember, we are Africans as well, and therefore the well-being of our neighbor is important to us. Kenya, Tanzania, we have Kenyans who are in Tanzania, we have Tanzanians who are in Kenya. We share borders. We have Maasai community across there. Even in Uganda, there are Kenyans who are basically, there are people who speak the same language with other Ugandans. So it's important that ultimately that Pan-African spirit also is maintained through a proper structure in AU that allows us to engage without injuring how we relate. And I think there's no better example to use than South Africa, which has been accused of xenophobia and sending away other Africans because they feel they're taking away their jobs. And now the backlash is now going on them. So we need to learn from Dangote. Look at how, despite the struggles in Nigeria, initially Shand, his refinery had a lot of challenges, but when things were tough,
yes,
he became the savior of the nation. Nigerians used to queue for fuel with jerry cans. Not anymore. Now they have secure, relatively cheaper fuel costs, as much as there are those fears of monopoly. But if as a business person you're ethical, and I think Dangote to a very large extent has shown that goodwill, you will attract suitors to be able to expand your space. And that's why you go to Burundi. I was shocked. I was in Burundi 3 weeks ago. I saw Dangote cement. So what does that tell you? It tells you that we have a continent that if we are able to embrace what is good for us, then we can expand intertrade amongst us. And I think those are also opportunities we should not lose, even as we welcome support from elsewhere.
Okay. As we come to a close, so the Nairobi Declaration at the end of the summit is going to be made. They are going to have that. But what are you looking forward to with specific investment opportunities and policy outcomes, Alexander? Because now at the end of the day, the declarations will be made. They are going to have adoptions and all that. What are you looking forward to?
Well, so far the summit's been structured to make an announcement, a turning point. I think, based on what my colleague has said, we're in violent agreement. Africa in the next 3 years is going to advance more than it has in the last 200.
Yeah.
I think that's, I don't think that's an exaggeration. The evolution of that is what we're seeing in real time right now. The French are struggling to reinvent themselves. How successful they're going to be? Well, let's wish them luck. There's 23 billion euros that were signed at the summit in investments directly related to the summit. 9 billion of that is private money. And about €1 billion is bilateral trade with France and Kenya in Kenya. And then it involves other countries as well. We don't hear a lot of press releases on the other deals, on the other countries. France is focusing in the energy field. CEO of Schneider Electric spoke yesterday. Interesting, they're focusing on cinema and culture, because that's something nobody can compete with the French on, other than perhaps America. But they're investing in courses here at the university and French cinema. Now, if you control the media, you can control the people if you're smart. So that becomes a big political tool, that kind of influence. So be careful there. America did that to Colombia. They demanded 60% of the content in Colombia be produced in Miami. Why would that be? Well, history speaks for itself.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a elongated series of press releases that come out. The G7's on about a month away from now in France. So you're going to see a continuation of President Ruto's efforts on promoting Kenya. And as I said, I think you're going to see some other countries come into the forefront here quietly. America's very quietly, expanding right now. Madagascar, it'd be interesting how that turns out. The Russia's making a big play in Africa too. You don't hear a whole lot about it, but they're in Madagascar now. There's a bit of a scandal going on with the French there. Another coup attempt. We'll see how that plays out. Chinese, they don't use military. They don't use shotgun diplomacy. They use their Belt and Road Initiative. They're going to have to reinvent themselves as well, because they've had some negative publicity in Africa with death spiral financing from infrastructure. And also it becomes a jealousy situation, which is very unfortunate. A lot of Chinese business people have been basically run out of Africa, Angola in particular. Bombings of malls or firing of malls, and that's not right. Okay, but it shows the level of desperation with poverty, as exemplified in South Africa. Africans kicking out Africans. It's like a reverse apartheid. Because they were a beacon of success, so of course they're going to attract other African nations that aren't quite as affluent. And this is normal human behavior. You can apply it to South America, to Europe, to Asia. It's not unique to Africa. So we have to take that into consideration.
All right. Has been any measurable impacts at the end of the day?
I think the tone has already been set from yesterday. So innovation has come out very, very strongly. Issues around climate action, those have also come out. So I expect that fix and all that. Energy transition, I think there is a very strong push in that space. Just to mention that I think we have a nuclear plant we are developing in Siaya.
Yes.
And there's no better partner in that energy space, especially nuclear energy, than France, that has 65% of its energy from nuclear. So they are good partners in that space if you can utilize that well. But also there's a fairer debt or financial architecture. I would expect that to be one of the outcomes that will then be something to look forward to going forward.
Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you give how have we behaved? You saw Emmanuel Macron telling us, hey, guys,
I think that was a low moment, but also a wake-up call. And listening to Alexander now, I'm trying to think through the agitation that Macron had in that conversation. What was the conversation going on?
And it was about culture, and
it was about
French.
It's about culture.
Yes.
And culture is the gateway to control. If I can influence your culture and how you do things, the rest of the other things become very easy to work around you. So perhaps it's the most important area of conversation. So we need to look at, you remember the sizzling that Alexander mentioned with the steak?
Yes.
We need to look at that because ultimately, once you influence culture in one way or the other, then the rest of the other things become easy. So it's important that, yes, we need to behave better. I think that was a low moment. But beyond that, why are the French so keen in cultural engagement?
The same way Kenya is also so keen on our athletes.
So the give and take.
Yeah.
We are keen on their money and the support around our development programs. They're also keen on how we integrate, and I think it's been part of their nature. Even from assimilation, if you look at the colonial era, the French took the assimilation route. They are very welcoming. Okay. I've not seen a head of state come to Kenya and greet our president the way Macron greeted President William Ruto. The hug, the warm greeting speaks to something. So it's probably a French thing, but of course, beyond the hug, then you need to get to business and protect both spaces.
So let's wait and see how it's going to end today, being the last day, and of course, a lot is going to happen during the day, and of course, this is where you're going to get everything from 9 a.m. Stay with us. My name is Victor Lowe. Thank you so much for joining us. FCPA Hezbollah Omolo, Council Member ISPAC, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Alexander Von Drugen, Global Policy Analyst. Asante sana.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, let's take a break. Good morning, can you continue after this?